Being able to trade down within tiers at positions while still maintaining production is by far the easiest way to add draft capital or just more assets in general to your Dynasty roster, and that is the point of this video. The way this is going to work is I'm going to show you guys stats from two similar players. One of them is valued at a premium in startups or trades, and the other is valued as the more generic version, and then we're going to break it all down. Now, first up, we have a juicy quarterback comparison that I already cannot wait to see the comments for. But our premium quarterback is currently 28 years old, turning 29 in season, and in 17 games played last year, averaged per game 38.5 pass attempts, 290 passing yards, 2.5 touchdowns, 1.9 fantasy points per game from just rushing, 21.8 fantasy points per game total, with 16 top 24 weeks, 13 of which were top 12. And our generic quarterback just turned 30 years old, and in 17 games played last year, averaged per game 33.5 pass attempts, 265 passing yards, 2.4 passing touchdowns, 3.3 fantasy points per game from rushing, 21.3 fantasy points per game total, and had 14 top 24 weeks, 13 of which were top 12. All right, I'll give you guys a few seconds to lock in your guesses on who each player is, because our premium player is Joe Burrow, valued, of course, as the QB4 on Keep Trade Cut at 8th overall in Superflex rankings. And our generic player is Baker Mayfield, valued as the QB17 at 47th overall, so basically 3+ rounds after Joe Burrow. Now, listen, I am not taking this comparison and making this advice lightly. I am not just saying to sell Joe Burrow just to be hot takey or to get some views from a very clickbait thumbnail. There is a right and wrong way to sell Joe Burrow for Baker Mayfield plus, but if you can do it the right way, your Dynasty team could be just infinitely better than it is right now with just Joe Burrow. Throughout the entire offseason, we have been super excited for the Bengals offense, especially after they paid both Jamar Chase and T. Higgins back in March to monumental deals. They re-signed Mike Gesicki, and all the while, their defense is probably still going to be pretty bad, and Joe Burrow has maintained a top 4 Dynasty value all offseason long. But for some reason, we don't have that same excitement for Baker Mayfield. Since January, his KTC value has topped out at QB 14 overall, and it has slowly declined since then to now being around QB 16 to QB 18, depending on the day. For what reason? I don't really know. I guess the Dynasty community is just more infatuated with the shiny toys of J.J. McCarthy off of a knee injury, Michael Penix's 3 mediocre games at the end of last season, Cam Ward as a rookie QB1, maybe C.J. Stroud can be good again, maybe Trevor Lawrence can be good for once in his career. I don't understand why we have so much hype for Joe Burrow and the Bengals offense and literally no hype for Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They still have Mike Evans, who, yes, is getting older, but it is still Mike Evans, who last year paced for 1,200 yards and 13 touchdowns after eclipsing 1,000 yards in essentially only 13 games played. They re-signed Chris Godwin, who, yes, is coming off of an injury, but since 2019, Godwin has never had under 1,000 receiving yards in seasons that he's played at least 14 games, and was doing some absolutely incredible things last year before getting hurt. They still have Jalen McMillan, they still have Cade Otton, Bucky Irving, and Rachaad White, and they drafted Emeka Egbuka in round 1. So even if Chris Godwin or Mike Evans slide a little bit in production due to health or age, they have a very high pedigree rookie waiting right behind them, plus Jalen McMillan as their wide receiver 4 and all the other weapons already named. Their only real loss was just Liam Cohen, which I know stings a lot, but with all the offensive and coaching staff consistency around Baker Mayfield otherwise, I'm really not as concerned. We were worried about them losing Dave Canales after 2023, and look how that turned out for them. They promoted their passing game coordinator to their offensive coordinator this year, so we could argue there's offensive continuity there from Liam Cohen's offense last year. Plus, it's just more consistency for having a guy in that role who's already worked with Baker Mayfield as the passing game coordinator during Baker's best season of his career. Losing Tristan Wirfs now recently to start the year also is going to suck, but I'm not really super worried about that at the moment, as it sounds like he could be back relatively soon in season. That's a minor short-term speed bump when you're looking at the more long-term bigger picture from a dynasty perspective. The other thing that we seem to be applying only to Baker Mayfield and not Joe Burrow is regression. Baker is going to regress this year. His 7.2% touchdown percentage and 7.9 yards per attempt are career highs. But why does regression just automatically equal that he's going to be bad? Let's say he throws for 5.2% touchdown percentage and a 7.5 yards per attempt. Well, his 2026 numbers could be 4,200 yards and 30 touchdowns plus another 250 and 3 on the ground. That is 19.5 fantasy points per game, which would have been good for QB 10 last year. QB 10 with regression. Now, let's do Joe Burrow, who also set a career high in touchdown percentage and just overall pass attempts last year. Let's say Burrow only drops to 5.5 touchdown percentage, which is half of the drop that Baker Mayfield had and also higher than Baker Mayfield. And we'll just shave off 20 pass attempts off of his total, which would still easily lead the league at 632, just not 650 like he had last year. Doing that would make his 2026 numbers be 4,700 yards and 35 touchdowns, plus another 200 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. That is 21 fantasy points per game, or the QB 7 last year, just 30 total fantasy points more than Baker Mayfield at QB 10. Baker Mayfield is in a tremendous offense with great receiving weapons, just like Joe Burrow. Baker is more mobile than Joe Burrow, which adds a very nice floor to his weekly fantasy numbers and elevates the ceiling a little too. Passing production wise, yes, Joe Burrow is going to be better than Baker Mayfield, but not by much. On DraftKings Sportsbook, they have Joe Burrow as the odds-on favorite to lead the league in passing yards this year. Baker Mayfield is 5th on that list and is only 300 yards behind Burrow in projections. Burrow, also the odds-on favorite to lead the league in passing touchdowns, while Baker Mayfield is 2nd on that list, right behind him with only 4 fewer touchdowns projected. Baker's also just a year and a half older than Joe Burrow, so there really isn't an age argument here either from a dynasty perspective. Let's also not forget that Joe Burrow has dealt with injuries in the past. He has missed 6 or more games in 2 of his 5 seasons played. Jamar Chase has missed 5 games over the last 3 years. T. Higgins, 10 games missed over the last 2 years. It's great that his contract is incentivizing him to play games, but if he really does get hurt this year, there's nothing that he or the Bengals or Joe Burrow can really do about that. Listen, I agree, 100%, no questions asked. I much prefer Joe Burrow to Baker Mayfield in Dynasty, but you can't argue that there might be very minimal production differences between the two, that if you can get a big enough plus on top of Baker Mayfield, it's probably going to be worth it. On Keep Trade Cut, the difference between the two is around the rookie 1.03, which is maybe Omarion Hampton if you're lucky, but it's more likely an already top 15 value dynasty receiver in either Travis Hunter or Tet McMillan. From a veteran standpoint, you might get a Bucky Irving, a Jonathan Taylor, or a Breece Hall at the running back position. It could be A.J. Brown, Rashee Rice, or Garrett Wilson at wide receiver. Or, depending on the makeup of your team, maybe you get Baker and Brock Purdy, or Baker and Kyler Murray, or Jordan Love, and you turn your one stud quarterback into 2 top 15 quarterbacks that are every week starters. That's a very pretty niche deal that takes 2 very specific teams to pull off, but it could be done. Like I said at the beginning, there is a right and wrong way to trade Joe Burrow for Baker Mayfield plus, if you're not getting enough back with Baker Mayfield to make it worthwhile for you. But I would bet that there are people out there that can get some pretty good deals done and have a very productive top 10 fantasy quarterback still, while also getting a potential fantasy RB1 or wide receiver 1 by making that trade down. All right, next up, we do have another pretty juicy comparison at the wide receiver position, where our premium receiver turns 25 years old in about 2 weeks, and in 17 games played last year, averaged per game 9 targets, 5.9 receptions, 65 receiving yards, 0.4 touchdowns, 14.7 fantasy points per game, with 6 top 24 weeks, 3 of which were top 12. And our generic receiver just turned 28 years old, and in 17 games played last year, averaged per game 8.2 targets, 5.8 receptions, 57 yards, 0.35 touchdowns, 13.9 fantasy points per game, with 5 top 24 weeks, 4 of which were top 12. And just like last time, I'll give y'all a few seconds to guess who each player is before I reveal the actual names. So our premium player is Garrett Wilson, valued as the wide receiver 13 at 33rd overall on Keep Trade Cut. And our generic player is DJ Moore, valued as the wide receiver 30 at 78th overall, which is practically 4 rounds later than Garrett Wilson. Now, this is a trade down option that I am 100% in on because I just don't believe in Garrett Wilson all that much for fantasy football, which sucks because he is such a phenomenal wide receiver in the NFL, but he has been hampered by severely lacking quarterback play all of his career, and I don't think that that stops in 2025. Justin Fields is not a good quarterback, and I will not listen to anyone who continues to believe that he is. And I don't care that Justin Fields and Garrett Wilson played together at Ohio State. I don't care that Justin Fields unlocked DJ Moore for his breakout year. Justin Fields is a career 61% completion percentage passer who has never topped 2,600 passing yards in a season or thrown for more than 17 passing touchdowns. And you want to take a guess what Vegas has Fields' passing line set at for this year? 2,500 passing yards, 14.5 passing touchdowns. That is abysmal for everybody on the Jets offense, especially Garrett Wilson. He's going to have a 45% dominator rating to even match what he's done statistically in his first 3 seasons if Fields is doing that all year long. His target share is going to have to be obscenely high in order to get enough volume to get to 1,100 yards, get to 5 receiving touchdowns, because raw targets have literally never been Garrett Wilson's issue. Target quality has most definitely has, but raw targets, never been an issue. But they might be a problem this year if Justin Fields is only throwing the ball 450 times, not to mention that he'll still have target quality issues because they're coming from Justin Fields. And I'm sure there's some of y'all out there who do agree with me that maybe Garrett Wilson's value is a little bit too high. Maybe you are looking to sell off of him right now, but why are we selling him to then buy DJ Moore, the guy who didn't even get to 1,000 yards in 17 games played last year and whose team just added a first-round tight end and a second-round wide receiver, plus the fact that he is getting old? Why are we buying into that guy? Well, I'll tell you why. As much as we all don't want to admit it or believe it, DJ Moore is the Bears wide receiver 1 still. That is not changing anytime soon. We're all debating if Rome Odunze can have that breakout year 2, if Luther Burden is going to get the Amon-Ra slot role, or even get enough snaps to even be good enough for fantasy football. We're debating how Colson Loveland and Cole Kmet could maybe vulture each other for fantasy, or force Chicago to run more 12 personnel so that they're both kind of relevant. All of those are very fun conversations, but they all literally fall behind the fact that DJ Moore is at the top of the target pecking order. Personally, I think DJ Moore is getting the Amon-Ra role in this Ben Johnson Bears offense, if there even is one to begin with. Moore is the guy who's the most dangerous in space and picking up yards after the catch. Moore is the excellent route runner who can get open quickly and has the surefire hands to pull in everything. Moore is the most experienced player they have on this offense behind their new offensive line additions and can be the trusted veteran that Ben Johnson trusts and Caleb Williams then also trusts. We all think DJ Moore had a very rough 2024 season, and that is mostly true. But as the numbers show, compared to Garrett Wilson, they really weren't all that different over the entirety of the year. And I'm sure Garrett Wilson fans are going to point me to the mini breakout that Garrett Wilson was having before Devontae Adams got there. But I would also then point people to the second half of the season that DJ Moore was having after the Bears fired Shane Waldron. From week 11 on, DJ Moore was on pace for 123 targets, 1,200 receiving yards, and 6 touchdowns on 157 targets. If that doesn't sound like an Amon-Ra St. Brown stat line, I don't really know what does. He was the wide receiver 11 overall over that stretch and wide receiver 16 in fantasy points per game, which was better than A.J. Brown, Nico Collins, and Jackson Smith and Jigba, and only a 10th of a point per game behind Drake London. And let me remind you, that was after the Bears fired Shane Waldron, but it was still with subpar offensive play calling, a horrendous offensive line, and a rookie Caleb Williams who was all over the place and doing way too much. All of the upgrades that the Bears got this offseason that everybody is so excited for everybody else on the offense, they all apply to DJ Moore as well. I would not be shocked if DJ Moore not only outproduces Garrett Wilson this year, but also finishes as a fantasy wide receiver 1 just like he did in 2023. Right now, the difference between the two is around an early second in Superflex leagues, maybe even a late first in 1 quarterback leagues, which in this class is not a bad rookie at all. It could be Tyler Warren or Colston Loveland at tight end. It could be a very good day 2 receiver like Jaden Higgins, Trey Harris, or even Matthew Golden. Maybe maybe you also add something to that early second round pick that you just got, and you move up for a Caleb Johnson or an Emeka Ibuka, something that you probably couldn't have done before because you didn't have that extra pick. On the veteran side, it could be a productive RB2 like Alvin Kamara, Joe Mixon, or James Conner. It could be Mike Evans, Devontae Adams, or Courtland Sutton for a win now wide receiver, or you take the shot on a Jaden Reed, Josh Downs, or Ricky Pearsall for a younger wide receiver who could gain value while also giving you solid production now. Maybe it's even TJ Hawkinson if you need a tight end at the tight end position. Again, my bet is that DJ Moore actually outproduces Garrett Wilson this year, so you just need enough of a piece back to offset the value and age loss between the two wide receivers. And if you're able to pull that off, you get a more productive wide receiver and another asset that can help you win now as well.